Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. This is a Ukraine War News Update, first part thereof for the 15th of September 2025. We're going to go straight to the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply, of course. You can find them linked in the description below. 910 personnel, that's over the 900 mark, but below 1,000, just in case you didn't know how numbers worked. So pretty much where it's been, give or take, for the last few weeks. 2 troop-carrying AFVs and no tanks at all, typically low in those categories. 35 artillery systems, again, typical, consistently over the daily average in that category. 1 multiple launch rocket system, 84 vehicles and fuel tanks, so below 100 there, and 1 piece of special equipment. A lot of drones, as you would expect, given what's been taking place over the last few weeks, although fewer drones actually over the last few nights than we have seen. So maybe, I wonder if that includes drones in the daytime, because there wasn't a massive attack 2 nights ago. So I wonder whether there have been quite a lot flying in the day. Okay, right, let's talk about a couple of personnel issues. So Ukrainian intelligence has just released a recording, says Tim White, of an intercepted conversation, supposedly of a Russian woman talking about problems for her loved one, Dimka, injured invading Ukraine. So, of course, this can't be verified. But of the 25 in his unit, 2 survived. And Dmitry has more holes than he should. So Dimka in the hospital yesterday, he got in touch, his leg in short, had 3 holes and a shard in his neck, but they didn't pull it out. Well, they didn't pull him out. He told me that if they pull him out, it means I will be treated for a long time, and they didn't need that. They need it to end up quickly and send me back. So obviously the Google Translate of the speech here is a bit dodgy. Well, out of 25, there are 2 left alive. We see, yes, he understood it even when he got there after 5 days of training. Yes, don't quite understand too much of how that conversation panned out. But the key point is that 2 out of 25 left. Wow. Incredible numbers there. Anecdote for sure, but we've seen enough of them to know that the Russian losses are going to be pretty significant. Now, confirmation from the 1st Azov Corps, Ukrainian forces have cleared Pankivka and surrounding areas in the Dobropili axis. Russia has responded by deploying 4 infantry brigades and a marine regiment. The area in yellow is likely under Ukrainian fire control. Russian units risk another encirclement. So this is the bunny ears area at the top of the Pokrovsk sector. Here's another view of it from a mapping point of view. The Ukrainians liberated the village of Pankivka and the surrounding areas. In particular, the 1st Corps of NGU Azov and adjacent units of the armed forces of Ukraine are working. So they're coming down through Volodomyrivka to Mayak there and clearing out this area to cut across. In fact, some people saying they have cut across there, leading to 2 areas of encirclement, and this 3rd one being worked on by trying to come down from the south and up, down from the north and up from the south there to cut this area off. Anyway, still a lot of people talking about that. Here's a claim that they have been cut off. Bunny ears, Russians are trapped there, encircled and cut off without real lines of communication as the Ukrainians clear Mayak and Pankivka in a Dobropili direction, says Grayskull. So could be good news for the Ukrainians there, but as I keep saying, that I've said that for a number of days because these things aren't resolved within just a few days. But they are suffering in other places, the Ukrainians, particularly south of here. And in fact, David D says that from reports, Russians are bringing in thousands of troops and are digging in. So this is south of Pokrovsk. The only thing this is doing is bringing Russians closer to Ukrainian drone teams and concentrating the targets for the Ukrainians to de-alive faster. So his opinion is actually the more troops you bring into here, the more vulnerable those troops become. So it's a very positive view of an amassing of Russian troops there, but it might all come down to Pokrovsk. This could be the PR victory that Putin wants so much that he throws a ridiculously large number of people into a sector to be attrited quite fundamentally. We shall see. Okay, I reported the other day that in the Kupiansk center, the Ukrainians had witnessed Russians coming through disused gas pipes to do for the third time a through the pipe surprise attack. So now we are seeing in the Kupiansk direction, Ukrainian forces reportedly lining the inside of a pipeline with barbed wire to prevent Russian troops from using it for movement or infiltration here. So let's just look at that more closely. Yeah, the Russians would struggle to negotiate that without some injury there. So that's clearly a challenge for the Ukrainians. The pipes are being used more than just occasionally, it seems. Now, Igor Sushko reports, and a number of people have said this, that the Ukrainians themselves are reporting a mass Starlink internet outage along the entire front line in Ukraine. Of course, that really affects the ability to operate drones and comms. And the update is that it is gradually coming back online. It seems to have been a global Starlink outage, but it shows the importance of Starlink, I think, probably for both sides there. Now, news from yesterday that Ukrainian rocket artillery was launching a massive strike using Gimler's rockets, so guided multiple launch rocket systems fired from the M142 HIMARS system, targeting Russian military facilities in occupied Zaporizhia and Kherson regions. Loud explosions were heard in Melitopol and Tokmak, including by Russian military bloggers. Ukrainian forces were bombing Russian troop positions and casualties are reportedly high. I've not seen any more evidence of this, or any evidence of this, other than those rather vague claims, but I get a sense that this is what the Ukrainians are up to quite routinely. And there were claims again of mass Ukrainian drone attacks down into Crimea and into occupied territories and over into Russia, but again, not a huge amount of detail about that. We'll come to that in a sec. Now, another video of a book, the sort of $40 to $50 million piece of Russian air defense equipment being supposedly taken out by a drone. Of course, it cuts out before it hits, so you're never quite sure. This is why people like Oryx don't list very much equipment like this. I think Andrew Perpetua, when he does it, would list that as damaged because it's highly likely that a drone has caused some damage, but of course damage, there's a whole multitude of sins covered by the word damage. It could just be burn marks on the side to fundamentally making it inoperable until it's repaired. But anyway, a Buk M3 air defense missile system near Alexandrivka in Zaporizhia region was targeted there by a drone. But yeah, I was saying that Oryx doesn't include those on his lists. And he in fact admitted that to that video. Jakub Janovsky writing for Oryx. So on the Kupiansk axis, recon from the 77th Air Assault Brigade spotted a Russian group trying to entrench near a residential building. So a T-72 tank was sent from the 7th Rapid Reaction Corps, and it destroyed the four-man unit with 5 precise shots from a claimed 9,100 meters. That's 9 kilometers. Using probably some kind of indirect, well, it would be indirect fire at 9 kilometers, I would have thought, to hit the Russian troops entrenched in this position. Now, what I find interesting is not so much the sheer range or the impressive range of this tank's shots, but actually 5 shells to take out 4 people. I've talked about this previously when I've shown you a whole battle taking place. I can't remember exactly what sector it was in, but you had the Ukrainian trench line being attacked by Russian infantry who were moving over maybe sort of, I don't know, a kilometer's worth of land. And you had mortar and artillery fire raining down on the Russians. And in the video, you probably had, I don't know, 20 Russian people there, and not all of them were taken out, and you had, drones operating mortar and artillery, and you probably had, I'm kind of guessing here at what it was, but probably at least 30, maybe 40 pieces of ordnance raining down on those troops, to the point where you're thinking that's probably 2 artillery shells per one person, and even then, you're not killing all the people. So this is why I think drones are seen as preferable often in many of these engagements, because if you have one drone per person, that's like $500 maybe tops per person, and the accuracy of the drones is far better than the artillery. Now, artillery can be super useful, but actually it's probably more expensive to do, and so that you are seeing the replacement of artillery to some degree by drones. Now, speaking of drones, here is a Ukrainian supply road with anti-drone nets. I think this is in the Kramatorsk direction. Kramatorsk is under immense pressure at the moment. You've got Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, Druzhkivka, Chasiv Yar, Konstantinivka. All of those towns are just hell to live in at the moment. And Kramatorsk and Sloviansk, those are big old places, really, but they are super suffering at the moment, to the point where they are erecting all sorts of drone nets to protect, well, not just logistics, but actually civilian routes as well, civilian logistics. Now, I don't know what has caused this, and I presume it's some kind of wildfire. Well, not wild, is caused by no doubt the war, but there's a huge fire. Thank you very much, Sarah. There's a huge fire on Mount Jan Kutaran near Feodosia in Crimea. Sorry, just getting delivered a cup of tea by my partner's daughter. So happy days. Life is all right, isn't it, for us tea drinkers? Damn, that's good. So a huge fire here. In fact, there's another video of it. This massive fire covering 6 hectares, 15 acres worth of land near Feodosia. That is huge. So I'm not quite sure what has caused that. But yeah, a problem for the Russians to deal with. Now, talking about fires, here we are going back to St. Petersburg, and another incident of note, says Tim White, at Gladky Island, Ostrov Gladky. A smoke was seen pouring from a bulk carrier, the Hongjiang. It arrived from South Korea yesterday, flying a Panamanian flag. A Shadow Fleet tanker, not sure. Officials say it was a welding accident, but that could be another issue in the St. Petersburg port area. And then another fire. So this is supposedly a massive wildfire near Kuleshkovka in the Rostov region, so not too far from Ukraine. Might have been caused by the war, by ordnance flying into dry undergrowth and whatnot. But yeah, another fire going on there. So quite a few of those fires taking place in Russia at the moment. Now, we're moving on to distance munitions. Tim White says the overnight bombardment from Russia remained lower than usual, although 84 drones and 3 S-300 surface-to-air missiles used in their ground attack mode caused a fair bit of damage to soft targets. He says, with 59 drones stopped, that's a 70% interception success rate, which is not great. But when you have fewer drones, then it's acceptable. So 59 out of, I presume, 84 drones, and then 3 missiles there. None of the missiles were intercepted, and it's difficult to intercept those missiles, probably sent into places close to the border, such as Sumy, Chernihiv, Kharkiv. The 28 hits occurred in 13 different places, though. We have some indication that Zaporizhzhia has been targeted overnight. Looks like, said Tim White last night. Let's look more closely at some of the destruction, starting with the attack reported on at the end of yesterday's thread in Zaporizhzhia region. The small coastal town of Kushahum was repeatedly attacked with a variety of rockets, with locals recording up to 10 hits. Almost 5,000 homes were without power after the attack in Kushahum. So actually that's 2 nights ago, just south of Zaporizhzhia city. No one was injured, with many having already evacuated and others sheltering during the alarm. But you can see the scale of the destruction to this civilian place. Russians targeted rescuers who were extinguishing a fire at a critical infrastructure facility in the Nizhyn district of Chernihiv region last night. That's a drone hitting there. 4 specialists from the state emergency service were injured. They were hospitalized, so it looks like a double tap in Chernihiv as they were trying to put the fire out at critical infrastructure. We don't know what the critical infrastructure is, though, so it could well have been some wide-scale damage done there. That's Max 25 reporting. And Tim White said there are fears over the safety of Slovyansk thermal power plant in Free Donetsk. Russian drones are over the village of Mykolaiivka. Once again, even publishing this image reproduced by a local channel. Tripilia thermal power plant in Kiev region was hit by 19 Shaheds. Annual restoration work was practically destroyed, and that's according to MP Nagornyak. So the Russians are definitely going for the Ukrainian infrastructure here in and around the whole of Ukraine. So we're talking Kiev there with 19 drones hitting that, and that's obviously a few nights back or some time ago, just coming out now. And then you got Slovyansk thermal power plant much closer to the front line. So we don't always hear about the success of the Russians, but don't for a moment think the Russians aren't doing tremendous damage to Ukraine on a nightly basis. Now, that reminds me, actually, I'm just going to read you this. So somebody said, yes, forgive me, Jonathan, please, but if you are going to broadcast this news, have the respect to learn how to say the names of the cities and towns you're reporting about. I navigate away from your channel because of your constant stumbling over language. And with all due respect, this really pissed me off. I do my best, but I can't handle linguistics in the way I used to. Now, I am going to pull out the disability card because I've got a degree in linguistics in language. And I used to be really good at language, but one thing that multiple sclerosis does to you is it strips away your ability to pronounce and say things in a way that you, certainly I used to be able to. I really struggle with language now. I really struggle with English, with finding the words and often like pronouncing things correctly, even in English. So this is one of the ways that MS has affected me. I struggle to find words, I struggle to pronounce words, and I struggle with foreign languages in a way that used to be my forte. Do you know how much that pisses me off? Right? So, with all due respect to, I don't know, this person, that actually genuinely annoyed me. Like, I spend virtually all my day at the expense of family life and the expense of all sorts, like reporting this. And I'd love to learn Ukrainian. I'd love to sit and learn how to pronounce stuff, but my brain isn't very good at that anymore. And I try my best, and people advise me and say, you don't pronounce it like this, you pronounce it like that. And I will forget soon because I have short-term memory loss. I have loads of issues to do with the way my brain works now that get in the way of this. And I am trying my damnedest to report on a daily basis. Like, if I get the pronunciation of names wrong, I'm just really sorry. You know, I'll forgive you, but please forgive me. Anyway, it's just only because I was thinking, like, I wonder if I've spoken more words on the Ukraine war than any other human on earth, like even the Ukrainians. I wonder, like, literally, like, I pump out sometimes 5 or 6 hours of content on this a day, and when I'm not talking about it here, I'm reading about it and I'm speaking about it to other people, and I'm down a pub speaking about it, I'm talking to my family about it. Yeah, there's a lot of words that come out, and yeah, I'm sorry if some of them aren't pronounced correctly. It's not that I'm trying to do it on purpose. I'm just not very good at pronouncing stuff. So there you go. If that means that you're going to not watch my content, so be it. I'm sorry, that's the case. Right, 3 Fab 250 bombs were dropped by Russian forces on central Kramatorsk this evening. That's yesterday evening, obviously. 9 civilians were injured, according to the city council. As I say, Kramatorsk is being absolutely battered. I mean, just look at that as a sight. It's, heartbreaking, really. 12 people were injured while harvesting in the Sumy region. Local officials say Russian rockets rained down on a farm and its fields in Boromlyansk. About 30 agricultural vehicles and machinery were damaged. Pieces of machinery were damaged. One of the injured is in a serious condition. So here we have damage that gets done to machinery by war, by the Russians. Now, we're going to go on to the Ukrainian attacks, and we don't have all that much information, even though, as per normal, last night there were all these maps of so many drones from Ukraine going into Russia, occupied territories, Crimea. And I have spoken to you a number of times about how I think the Russians are successful in shooting down Ukrainian drones. And I know some of you who are very hopeful about Ukraine are like, no, they're flying up here doing this, or this is happening, or OPSEC. But the reality is, I'm fairly sure a large proportion of Ukrainian drones are getting shot down every night. And when you're talking about how much a drone costs, and you equate that how much damage it does, you should actually think about how much all the drones cost in that one particular wave at one particular target. So, for example, if you see, I don't know, $100,000 drone slam into a oil refinery, I would assume that that drone is the one that got through when maybe 15 didn't. And you should be acquainting the cost of all those 15 or 16 drones, as opposed to just that one single one that succeeded. Now, this is coming from Serhiy Flash. Quote, so that you don't think it is easy to reach Russian targets. He says, I'll tell you this. These attacks are made with great effort. Russia also has air defense and electronic warfare capabilities. All these attacks are the result of great work in finding targets and planning routes to them. Why the refinery? For long-range attacks, a scenario is quite possible when, for example, 2 out of 20 drones will reach. So here's a guy in the know that's saying, quite possibly 2 out of 20 drones will reach that destination. And these 2 drones, with a charge of tens of kilograms, are not capable of causing much damage to fortified military facilities or enterprises, for example, underground. So the kind of munitions they have aren't very good at taking out military targets. Military targets are generally better protected. But he goes on to say, but in a refinery, there are large and important elements on the surface that cannot be moved or closed. There are parts of the technological process. They are part of the technological process and are easily handled. I presume that means easily targeted, easily hit. The same applies to all above ground stationary fragments of the oil and gas industry. And to cause significant damage to industrial enclosed facilities, ballistics or a cruise missile with a warhead weighing 500 to 800 kilograms is needed. So in order to actually do damage to these military facilities, we need proper cruise missiles or ballistic missiles. And we don't really have those in any scaled numbers at the moment, despite what were claimed about the FP1s and FP5s. Certainly with the Flamingo, we're now hearing that they're going to be, we heard recently that they're making 1 a day, and it should be, 7 a day by October? Now they're saying they're going to be scaled by next year. I think the Flamingo facility was hit. After they did advertise it, they had that video, and I don't know if that video of the facility caused it was taken inside, but maybe there was some recognition of where that was, and that got to the Russians and they struck the facility. Again, that's my speculation, but if they're moving back the scaled production of those missiles by sort of 3 months plus, of course, 2026 can include any number of months there. So at least 3 months, then I think the Russians are striking the Ukrainian missile production, and that's meaning they're having to do most things with their, I think, still scaled up drone production, but those drones are predominantly being shot down, or electronic warfare is playing its part. Now, explosions were reported in occupied Severodonetsk, Luhansk Oblast following the arrival of a drone. That was yesterday daytime. Details of the strike and its target are still unknown. We have this pretty striking video, pun intended, and it was already smoking. So I presume that was the detonation of ammunition there, but I can't say for certain. There have been hits on occupied parts of Ukraine, said Tim White yesterday. Much as it's nice to see Ukrainians filming Russians' demise in the parts controlled by invaders, they need to take care when Russians store weapons and ammo anywhere. This is in Donetsk. Then we hear that, so that's all I have on the strikes last night. I'll just see if there's anything that's been released subsequently. Ukrainian drone strikes on the Ufa oil refinery today, he says, Igor Sushko, are the longest range strikes on Russian oil refinery so far, 1,450 kilometers from Ukraine, possibly 1,600 kilometers from the launch site. I don't know if that's today because that was hit the other day. That's looking like... So Russia, Ukrainian drones struck 2 facilities in the Ufa oil refinery 3 kilometers apart in the occupied Republic of Bashkortostan, Bashneft Novoil and Bashneft UNPZ. The complex refines 23.5 million tons of oil annually across 3 sites, 470,000 barrels a day. Although it's just reported that looks like the same footage from the other day. So yeah, not too sure if that's actually referring to anything that's happened today. We have a Ukrainian strike destroying a Russian radar station in Rostov Oblast. Russia's lost a key air traffic control radar system in the southern region after Ukrainian forces struck the RLK-1 Navigatsia Yuga complex on the 4th of September. So that's going back some time, but we're now getting confirmation of that. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else to add other than more information on this Astra, the Russian media outlet, reporting on 2 damaged installations of the Bashneft plants in Ufa, the AVT-1 installation, AVT-6 installation damaged there. So that was September the 13th. So yeah, that was a couple of days ago, not from last night at all. Other than that, no. Just more stuff on sanctions, but quite a bit of stuff coming out there, so I might have to talk about that in the last section. Okay, so let's just carry on talking about what I was going to talk about, which is Poland, right? And the drones that went into Poland. We're still talking about that on the September the 10th, 5 nights ago. Lithuania may have concealed information about a possible Russian drone incursion on September the 10th, coinciding with mass drone violations over Poland. The former speaker, Saulius Skvernelis, accused the Defense Ministry of pressuring the military to suppress data, and an official inquiry is expected soon. European allies on this same topic questioned Trump's NATO commitment after his muted response to Russian drone attack on Poland, according to Reuters. So Trump very clearly didn't really think, although he didn't think too much of the strike drones entering Poland, his response was muted, as mentioned here. It was pretty underwhelming. Quote, with this US administration, we can't rely on anything, but we have to pretend that we could, said a senior German official. No one in NATO has been particularly reassured by the US at this point. Washington's silence has been almost deafening, an Eastern European diplomat said. Quote, this episode underscores that Trump, in contrast to every president since Roosevelt, does not see Europe's security as fundamental to American security, said a former US NATO ambassador. Trump's reaction on Truth Social, quote, what's with Russia violating Poland's airspace with drones? Here we go. Remember, that was his famous kind of very pithy and ridiculous response. Now, Igor Sushko here says, after increasing attacks on NATO countries by Russian war drones, Europeans are talking about the Sky Shield plan again to shoot down Russian drones and missiles over Ukraine, which they shelved in 2022. But not all of Ukraine, just near the NATO border. Now, this is what I was suggesting the other day. I was saying that what the NATO nations need to do and bordering nations need to do is start shooting down drones in their own countries, flying over their own airspace. So say you're Poland, you're shooting down anything that comes across the border, then you say, oh no, for safety, actually we need to shoot down anything that's sort of 10 kilometers from the border. In other words, 10 kilometers into Ukrainian airspace for our own safety. But of course, what you're doing there is you're helping out Ukraine a lot for our own safety, right? And that is a way you push the envelope back towards the Russians and see what their response is, because the Russians keep doing that to the Ukrainians and, well, not to the Ukrainians, but to the Western allies and NATO allies of Ukraine. And there's abject silence and a lack of willingness to engage in confrontation with Russia. So you just let it happen. Well, actually, you need to take back the initiative when speaking and dealing with Russia. So Igor Sushko says, basically, this is the most cynical stuff imaginable. Europeans don't want to shoot down Russian drones over their own territory for fear of debris damage on the ground. Instead, they want to shoot down the drones over Ukrainian villages before the drones enter NATO airspace. Yeah, But I would say that's better than the alternative, than letting the drones come, as what happened in Romania the other night. You let the drone come into Romanian airspace, you follow the drone, and then it turns around and goes back into Russian airspace. You say, oh, nothing to see here. We just allowed that drone to go back and bomb the Ukrainians. I think they should be trying to shoot these drones down as safely as possible over, hopefully, non-critical land, like the Ukrainians are very good at doing. They try and shoot them down over, say, farmland and whatnot. So I would hope that Sky Shield project actually has legs, and I would hope that the NATO allies push that protection across the border somewhat. But then Medvedev, good old Dmitry Medvedev, after a couple of vodkas and here maybe a champagne, says, if NATO shoots down our drones over Ukraine, a war with Russia will begin. So they're massively saber-rattling on that topic because they know that that will hurt them if the NATO allies come to Ukraine's aid. And I think they should. And I don't think that threat is anything that Russia would be able to follow through on. So Ilya Ponomarenko says, so listen up, kids. When Russia deliberately launches dozens of drones against Poland and Romania, that is not warmongering and not a threat of war between Russia and NATO. But when European countries even theoretically consider the possibility of helping Ukraine shoot down Russian drones over Ukrainian territory so that Russia cannot use them to attack European countries, that suddenly becomes a war between NATO and Russia. Don't get it confused. So Medvedev's position there, I think, is untenable, and I think Ilya Ponomarenko points that out absolutely perfectly. Now, to go on to other bits and pieces, the relieving of sanctions on Belarus, which I wasn't a fan of, even though you got political prisoners released, I think this is a problem. So Anton Gerashenko points this out. So on September the 11th, 2025, it became known that the USA lifted sanctions on Belavia, the Belarusian state-owned airline. This opens the way for Russian aviation to rather easily obtain the spare parts needed to service its air fleet, both civilian and military, since many of those parts are dual use. There is no doubt that Russia will take advantage of this. Notably, Belavia removed the page describing its air fleet from its official website. European sanctions against Belavia remain in force. In other words, they're not telling you what planes they have so they can start ordering parts in for Russia because they're ordering parts that their fleet doesn't, parts for planes that their fleet doesn't own. They're not part of their own Belarusian fleet. They're part of Russian fleets and they're ordering the parts in from other nations on behalf of Russia. That, I think, is really frustrating. Now, I keep talking to you about whether Trump is an actual asset, whether he's actually doing things through agency to support Russia, or whether he's a useful idiot and is just otherwise aligned to Russia, but is not actually, a paid agent of the Russians, if you like. And then we can talk about compromat and whatnot. And I said to you, there was an article that talked about this. Well, here's a quote from it. I think it's a Guardian article from yesterday. The reality is very different. When Trump is faced by tough, unyielding opponents, rather than soft targets, he folds. He chickens out. Russia's President Vladimir Putin and Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu worked this out long ago. Both men play him for a sucker. They flatter him. They spin lies about wanting peace. They offer easy wins. Then they go home, as was the case with Putin after last month's embarrassing Alaska summit, and carry on doing whatever they want, which usually involves even greater violence. When an angry Trump calls to complain, as after Netanyahu's Qatar raid, and whinges pathetically that he's not happy, he merely confirms his weakness and is ignored. Netanyahu has ignored Trump. Trump has no purchase on the Israelis and what they are doing. They can freely bomb Doha and do all sorts of things in Yemen as well. And they can just do that willy-nilly. The US will whinge to them and they'll go, yeah, whatever, Trevor. And the same with Russia. Russia is just manipulating Trump and he's putty in their hands. So I thought that's an interesting observation. And then you listen to Trump here on NATO and Europe needing to step up. Oh, I don't know why he does this. Why does he go and sit under jet engines? I'll read it to you. Trump said, NATO and Europe need to step up. My friends in Europe are still buying Russian oil. Unacceptable. I wish you'd say them by name, Slovakia and Hungary, and go and do something directly to stop Hungary doing that. Their sanctions aren't tough enough. I'm ready to go forward with sanctions, but they need to match them. Right now, they talk but don't act. We don't buy Russian oil. They shouldn't either. Actually, you're buying Russian oil through a refinery in India that gets exported to the US. So that is not true. You're not buying Russian crude oil, but you're buying refined Russian crude oil through another nation. But anyway, I digress. It's this idea that it's all about everyone else needing to act, and then eventually we'll act. It's just weak. It's really, really weak from the United States. And the idea that their sanctions aren't tough enough when the EU and UK, and we can add on other allies like Japan and Canada here, when we have kept a tough oil price cap, and when we have put package after package after package of sanctions on the Russians, how dare you come along and say we're not tough enough when you have let sanctions enforcement lapse, when you have not put any further sanctions on, meaningful sanctions. I reported some news of, say, 10 sanctions being put on in last night's geopolitical video. But ostensibly, you haven't been putting these raft of sanctions on that Europe has. So I think, don't throw stones in glass houses. Then he said this: the hatred between Zelensky and Putin is unfathomable. I think I'm going to have to do all the talking. They hate each other so much they almost can't talk. This is unfathomable. Like, he can't understand how it could be that Zelensky could hate Putin that much. When his country's been invaded, he's lost huge numbers of people, civilians and soldiers alike, that some cities have been reduced to rubble, that people have been murdered, civilians murdered and raped, children likewise. Everyone's lost someone in Ukraine. And he's like, I can't work out why do they hate each other? Why do they hate each other? It's just unfathomable. Honestly, mate, sort it out. And I've done a video on this. Keith Kellogg said, Trump asked me if Russia was winning. I said no. I told him to ask General Kane, and he said no as well. Just a really quick synopsis of my video is, this is evidence that Trump is not taking intelligence briefings. He hasn't got a clue what's going on in Ukraine, whereby he has to ask Keith Kellogg after he gets back from Ukraine, oh, by the way, who's winning the war? Like, your intelligence briefings should be telling you this. And General Kane should be telling you this, not after Keith Kellogg tells you to go and speak to General Kane, who's your Joint Chiefs of Staff. You should know that on a daily basis because you're getting briefings. So this is evidence. It's just a little throwaway comment from Keith Kellogg here, but it tells you everything you need to know about Trump's fundamental lack of knowledge about the war in Ukraine. He is fundamentally ignorant of the requisite knowledge he needs to make decisions concerning the war in Ukraine. By the way, who is winning? Like, if I know that and I'm a bleeding YouTuber, you should know that as President of the United States. You shouldn't need to ask that to someone 7 months into your regime. It's just insane. Good news is, but I think this is something that he said by mistake, and he would probably not say that going forward. Now, Politico is reporting that Trump finally calls Russia the aggressor in a war in Ukraine. Now, this shouldn't be news. It's news because he doesn't do it, because he is very careful about his rhetoric concerning Russia, and he never wants to see them as morally culpable for the war in Ukraine, because it's Biden's war and it's Zelensky's war, as he said on Truth Social 2 days ago. Here, Trump has finally labelled Russia the aggressor in the war against Ukraine, further demonstrating a hardening of his position toward Ukraine. Possibly, but I also think it could be a mistake. He said 8,000 soldiers have died this week from both countries, some more from Russia, but when you're the aggressor, you lose more. So this is like, well, Russia are obviously attacking, so you're going to lose more troops attacking than defending. Well, yeah, true, but I don't think if he had been thinking carefully or saying something, say, on Truth Social that would have been carefully scripted, he wouldn't have said that. So that, when you're the aggressor, you lose more, I think was a slip of the tongue. But my goodness, that should be like your basic position. President Stubb here from Finland says, if you look at this thing from the perspective of Putin and the Kremlin, you have to ask yourself, how did I do? First, the aim was to take over Ukraine in a special operation in 4 days. Here we are 4 years into the war. Second was to create disunity in the West. I've never seen it more united before, including actually the transatlantic partnership. Third was to minimize the defense expenditure of NATO members. Trump has just hiked us up from 2% to 5%. So he's definitely playing the old Trump card there. Oh, well done, Trump. You did this rather than the war did this. And the icing on the cake is, of course, that Putin doubled his border to NATO through Finland and then eventually Sweden. So he has failed in all of his strategic goals, including the fact that Ukraine became very European and not Russian at all. Very well said there from President Stubb of Finland. And I'm going to leave you with the Car for Ukraine fundraiser we're doing and the two just very quick appeals from units that we are supporting. This is the 92nd Brigade appealing to us as a team here. You can hear it to begin with, then I'll read out their subtitles. Greetings, everyone. We are the fighters of the 92nd Brigade, currently fighting the Kharkiv direction, holding Russians' offences. We badly need a vehicle to deliver supplies and other needs of our units. I'm reaching out to Jonathan and his ATP Geopolitics community, that's you guys, as well as for Car for Ukraine and the Bandera Midbil team to help us buy, service and deliver a vehicle to us. Thank you. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes. That's really good news. Good stuff to hear from them. And here's another unit also saying similarly. This is a 25th Airborne in Pokrovsk. So these guys, you know they're in the thick of it. We'd like to ask Jonathan. Sorry, greetings. Let's go back and turn the sound off. Greetings, dear friends. We are the paratroopers of the 25th Separate Airborne Assault Brigade, currently operating around the Pokrovsk region and holding Russian offensives here. We require a vehicle to get supplies to our pilots and evacuation of wounded. We'd like to ask Jonathan and his ATP Geopolitics community to help us supporting this fundraiser as well as Car for Ukraine. Assist us with purchasing, preparation, delivery of the vehicle to the front line. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. So both of those units are in desperate need of assistance for getting some vehicles, and that's where we come in. If we go to atpgeo.com/donate, go to the autumn harvest trucks, and that should go straight to ATP Geopolitics. And wow, we're now over 5,000. That's amazing towards the 22,000 two-truck objective. You can get yourself patches, you can get yourself pins, you can go and see all the details. You get your name on a sticker on the vehicle that looks something like that, and I'll show it to you. And just the people who have added to this, thank you so much. Really super general from Walter Kichavlas. I probably mispronounced that. Sorry, Walter, you legend. Kevin, Carl Rudd, Jan-Peter Schroeder. Thank you very much to those adding to all the people previously, and they're all really generous. You can see there Kevin, Carl Rudd, Jan-Peter Schroeder, and Walter being super kind. So thank you for your incredible generosity helping out with this fundraiser. Take care, everybody, and I'll speak to you soon.